Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his dress uniform for the 100th time as the shuttle approached the massive Zephyrian mothership. 3 years of war had finally led to this moment, the first diplomatic contact between humanity and the alien empire that had been systematically conquering star systems across the galaxy. Nervous, Captain? Asked Ambassador Chen, the seasoned diplomat who would be leading the negotiations. Jake shook his head, though his palms were sweaty. Just want to make a good impression. These Zephyrians have technology that's centuries ahead of ours. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Jake felt his stomach drop as artificial gravity adjusted. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor that seemed carved from living crystal, pulsing with soft blue light. 2 tall figures waited for them, Zephyrian guards in flowing robes that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Welcome, humans. One guard spoke through a translation device that made their voice sound eerily melodic. Princess Lyrelei awaits your presence in the negotiation chamber. As they walked through corridors filled with impossible architecture, walls that curved in directions that hurt to look at, floors that felt solid but appeared transparent, Jake couldn't help but feel like an ant visiting a palace built by gods. The Zephyrians they passed were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer and large eyes that held ancient wisdom. The negotiation chamber was vast, with a table that appeared to be made from a single piece of black stone that reflected stars. At its head sat Princess Lyrelei, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, tall and graceful, with silver hair that moved as if underwater and eyes like captured starlight. Her presence filled the room with an authority that made even Ambassador Chen straighten his shoulders. Humans, she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. You have fought well against our forces despite your primitive technology. We respect warriors even when they are small. Ambassador Chen stepped forward with practiced diplomacy. Your Highness, we come seeking peace between our peoples. Humanity may be young, but we are resourceful and determined. Princess Lyrelei's expression remained neutral as she gestured to seats that molded themselves to fit human proportions. Sit, let us discuss terms. Your species has proven surprisingly resilient, but you must understand. The Zephyrian Empire spans 1,000 worlds. Earth is but a single planet. Jake found himself studying her face as the ambassador began formal negotiations. There was something in her expression, a flicker of curiosity when she looked at the humans. Most aliens they'd encountered in this war had treated humanity with barely disguised contempt, useful only as slaves or test subjects. But Princess Lyrelei seemed genuinely interested in what Ambassador Chen was saying about human culture and achievements. Your mathematics are crude but creative, she admitted when Chen mentioned humanity's recent breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication. We achieved such things 10,000 years ago, yet your approach is refreshingly different. Hours passed as they discussed territorial boundaries, trade agreements, and prisoner exchanges. Jake remained silent as befitted his role as military escort, but he watched the princess carefully. She was clearly intelligent, possibly more so than any human, yet there was something almost lonely about her. When she thought no one was looking, her composed mask would slip slightly, revealing what looked like weariness. During a break in negotiations, while Ambassador Chen reviewed documents with his aide, Jake found himself alone with the princess. The silence stretched uncomfortably until she spoke. You are quiet for a warrior, Captain Morrison. Do you not have opinions on these proceedings? Jake considered his words carefully. I'm here to ensure the ambassador's safety, Your Highness. But if you're asking what I think both our peoples are tired of fighting. War is expensive and everyone loses someone they care about. Something shifted in her expression, surprise perhaps. You speak of loss. Have you lost someone in this conflict? My brother Tom was on the colony ship Endeavour when your fleet attacked the Kepler system. And my wife Sarah died defending the orbital stations around Mars. Jake's voice remained steady, though old pain flickered in his eyes. But I'm guessing you've lost people too. Even princesses have people they care about. For a moment, Princess Lyrelei's composure cracked entirely. My brother commanded the Second Fleet when your forces made their desperate stand at Alpha Centauri. Your pilots, they fought with a ferocity that cost him his life. I have wondered since then what drives humans to such lengths. Same thing that drives anyone, Jake said quietly. Love, fear, hope. The belief that what you're fighting for is worth dying for. She studied him with those strange, starlight eyes. You are not what I expected from your species military. What did you expect? Brutality. Ignorance. Most young species we encounter are driven by base instincts. She paused, then added almost wonderfully, You have depth. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Here he was, having a philosophical discussion with an alien princess whose people had been trying to conquer Earth for 3 years. It should have been impossible, yet somehow it felt natural. Your Highness, he said, then caught himself. The formal title felt awkward after their honest conversation. Without thinking, he said, Sorry, sweetheart. I mean, Your Highness. I apologize for the informal address. He immediately wanted to crawl into a hole and die. He'd just called an alien princess, one whose fleet could glass Earth in an afternoon, sweetheart. His military career was probably over, along with the peace negotiations and possibly his life. But instead of anger or offense, Princess Lyrelai's eyes widened slightly, and then something remarkable happened. She smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed her entire face from imperial dignity to something almost human. Sweetheart, she repeated the word carefully, as if tasting something new and delicious. What an interesting term. In your language, this indicates affection, yes? Yes, Your Highness. It's what you call someone you care about. I really didn't mean to. Then I shall respond in kind, my darling human, she said. And there was something musical in the way she pronounced darling that made Jake's heart skip a beat. The negotiations resumed, but something fundamental had changed in the room's atmosphere. Ambassador Chen shot Jake a look that could have melted steel, but Princess Lyrelai seemed oblivious to the diplomatic tension her response had created. If anything, she appeared more engaged in the negotiations than before, asking detailed questions about human culture and society that went far beyond the standard treaty requirements. Tell me about this concept you call democracy, she said during their second day of talks. Our intelligence suggests that humans choose their leaders through some form of mass selection process. Ambassador Chen launched into a prepared explanation about representative government and electoral systems. But Princess Lyrelai's attention kept drifting to Jake. Every time she caught him looking at her, she would offer that same warm smile that made his chest tighten. Captain Morrison, she said suddenly, interrupting Chen mid-sentence about congressional oversight. You served under this democratic system. Do you believe it's superior to imperial rule? Jake glanced nervously at Ambassador Chen, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Well, Your Highness, I think every system has its advantages. Democracy can be messy and slow, but it means everyone gets a voice. Imperial rule can be more efficient, but it depends entirely on having good emperors or princesses. And do you think I am a good princess? There was something almost playful in her tone that made Ambassador Chen frown. I think, Jake said carefully, that any leader who genuinely cares about peace instead of conquest is probably doing something right. Princess Lyrelai leaned forward slightly, her starlight eyes fixed on his face. Even if that leader belongs to a species you've been fighting for 3 years? Especially then, Jake replied without hesitation. It takes courage to choose peace when war would be easier. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that transcended species boundaries and political complications. Ambassador Chen cleared his throat loudly, drawing their attention back to the treaty documents spread across the Starstone table. Perhaps we should discuss the proposed neutral zone boundaries, Chen suggested with pointed diplomatic precision. The rest of the day proceeded more formally, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Princess Lyrelai was studying him as much as she was the treaty terms. During breaks, she would ask him questions that seemed designed to understand human nature rather than human politics. Your ambassador speaks of human achievements in art and literature, she said while they walked through a crystal garden aboard her ship. Strange plants that seemed made of living light swayed in an artificial breeze. Do you appreciate such things, Captain Morrison? I'm just a soldier, Your Highness. I don't know much about high culture, but surely you have preferences. Music you enjoy? Stories that move you? Jake found himself talking about old Earth songs his father had played in their workshop, about books he'd read during long deployments between the stars. To his surprise, Princess Lyrelai listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that showed she was really hearing what he said. There is one human story I have encountered. In our cultural database, she said as they paused, beside a fountain that sang with crystalline notes, Romeo and Juliet by your Shakespeare. Two lovers from warring families who choose love over loyalty to their clans. Is this representative of human romantic ideals? Jake almost choked on the water he'd been drinking from a cup that had materialized in his hand. You've read Romeo and Juliet? Our translators have been studying human literature to better understand your species. The concept of choosing personal affection over family duty is fascinating to us. Zephyrian marriages are typically arranged for political or genetic advantage. That sounds lonely, Jake said without thinking. Princess Lyrelay stopped walking. In the strange light of the crystal garden, her expression was unreadable. Lonely, she repeated. Yes, I had not considered it in those terms, but yes. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching alien fish swim through the air as if it were water. Finally, Princess Lyrelay spoke again. What about you, Jake Morrison? Do you have someone waiting for you on Earth? No, he said quietly. Lost my wife in the war, like I mentioned. Haven't really thought about anyone since then? I am sorry for your loss. War takes much from all of us. What about you? Any Zephyrian prince in the wings? She laughed, a sound like silver bells in a breeze. Several have been proposed by the Imperial Council. All are suitable matches. Powerful, wealthy, genetically compatible. All are also completely boring. Boring how? They see me as Princess Lyrelay, heir to the Starlight Throne, commander of 1,000 fleets. None of them seem interested in simply Lyra. The way she said her shortened name, soft and almost vulnerable, made Jake's heart race. Lyra's a beautiful name. You think so? She looked pleased. It means Song of the Stars in our ancient tongue. My mother chose it because I was born during a solar storm that made music in our atmosphere. Lyra, Jake repeated, testing the way it felt on his tongue. Much better than your highness? I agree, my darling human, she replied. And there was that musical quality in her voice again that made him feel like he was falling through space. They continued their walk, conversation flowing more easily than Jake had ever experienced with another person, even though she wasn't technically a person at all. She asked about his childhood on Mars Colony, his military training, his dreams before the war started. In return, she told him about growing up in crystal palaces among the clouds of the Zephyrian homeworld, about learning statecraft from tutors who were older than human civilization, about the weight of knowing that billions of lives depended on her decisions. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be ordinary, she admitted as they reached her private quarters. The door was a sheet of liquid starlight that parted at her approach. To make choices based on what I want rather than what my empire needs. What do you want? Jake asked. Princess Lyrelay turned to face him fully, and in her eyes he saw something that made his breath catch. To continue this conversation without the weight of crowns and treaties between us, she said softly. To discover what else you might call me besides sweetheart, and to find out if human hearts beat as strangely as mine does when you smile. Jake stared at her, hardly believing what he was hearing. An alien princess, a being of immense power and ancient nobility, was looking at him like he was something precious and rare. Lyra, he said, stepping closer. I think my heart's been beating strangely since the moment you called me darling. Her smile could have lit up the entire ship. Good, she whispered. Then perhaps we are both fools together. The third day of negotiations brought unexpected complications. Ambassador Chen had discovered Jake's growing friendship with Princess Lyrelay, and he was not pleased. Captain Morrison, a word, Chen said tersely after the morning session ended. He led Jake to their assigned quarters aboard the Zephyrian ship, where they could speak privately. Sir, I can explain. Can you? Chen's diplomatic composure cracked slightly. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're developing an inappropriate attachment to our host. Need I remind you that she's an alien? And not just any alien. She's the daughter of the being who ordered the attack on Mars that killed your wife. Jake felt anger flare in his chest. With respect, Ambassador, Princess Lyrelay wasn't involved in those early attacks. She was off-world studying advanced physics at their science academy. I checked the records. You checked the... Chen stared at him. Captain, you're fraternizing with the enemy. This could compromise everything we're working toward. She's not the enemy, Jake said firmly. She's trying to negotiate peace. If anything, building rapport with her helps our cause. Chen studied Jake's face for a long moment. You're falling for her, aren't you? Captain, I've seen diplomats make this mistake before. She's exotic, powerful, beautiful in her way. It's natural to be attracted. But she's not human, Jake. Whatever you think you're feeling, whatever she's making you feel, it can't lead anywhere good. Before Jake could respond, a soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Chen activated the door panel, and Princess Lyreley stepped through the liquid starlight barrier. She had changed from her formal negotiation robes into something simpler, a flowing dress that seemed to be made of captured moonlight. Gentlemen, I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, though her eyes went immediately to Jake. Captain Morrison, I wondered if you would care to join me for the evening meal. I thought you might enjoy trying Zephyrian cuisine. Chen stepped forward quickly. Your Highness, while we appreciate your hospitality, perhaps it would be more appropriate for Captain Morrison to dine with our delegation. With respect. Ambassador, Princess Lyreley said, and there was steel beneath her musical voice. I am not asking him to share state secrets over dinner. I am asking him to sample our food and perhaps tell me more about human culture. Unless Earth's diplomatic protocol forbids such exchanges? Chen's jaw tightened. Of course not, Your Highness. Captain Morrison is free to accept your invitation. Jake looked between them, feeling the tension in the air. I'd be honored, Your Highness. Wonderful. Shall we say 1 hour? I will have my aide show you the way. After she left, Chen turned back to Jake with a warning expression. Be careful, Captain, I mean it. There are forces at play here that you don't understand. An hour later, Jake found himself in Princess Lyreley's private dining chamber, an intimate space with walls that showed real-time views of distant nebulae. The table was smaller than the grand conference room setup, designed for 2 people rather than formal negotiations. You look troubled, Jake, Princess Lyreley said as they began their meal. The food was unlike anything he'd ever tasted. Flavors that seemed to shift and evolve on his tongue, accompanied by drinks that sparkled with their own inner light. Just thinking about what Ambassador Chen said earlier, about complications. Ah, she said, setting down her utensil. He disapproves of our friendship. Do your people disapprove too? Princess Lyreley was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the stars. My Imperial Council believes I should maintain appropriate distance from humans. They see your species as interesting curiosities at best. Some question whether you are truly intelligent or simply clever animals. Jake felt a chill. And what do you think? I think, she said, turning to face him with those starlight eyes, that anyone who could create music like the song you hummed yesterday while walking through my gardens, anyone who speaks of love and loss and hope the way you do is more than intelligent. You are, what is your word, soulful? I hummed. She smiled. You were not aware? It was something soft and sad. When I asked our cultural database about the melody, it identified it as Danny Boy, an old Earth song about love and separation. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd been thinking about his brother Tom when he hummed that tune, Tom who used to sing it while they worked together before the war. But somehow here in this alien place it had transformed into something else. My brother taught me that song, he said quietly, the one who died at Kepler. I am sorry. I did not mean to bring painful memories. It's not painful anymore. Not when you mention it. Somehow you make even the sad memories feel lighter. Princess Lyreley reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm despite its pale blue color, and Jake could feel a faint electric tingle where they touched. Jake, she said softly, I must tell you something. In 3 days, when these negotiations conclude, I am expected to return to the Imperial homeworld. There, the Council will formally announce my betrothal to Prince Vextar of the Northern Fleets. Jake's stomach dropped. Betrothal? It was arranged years ago, a political alliance to strengthen our hold on the outer territories. Prince Vextar is suitable. Powerful fleet commander, excellent genetic profile, comes from a family with strong military traditions. Do you love him? I have met him twice. He is polite, efficient, and considers humans to be vermin that should be exterminated rather than negotiated with. Her fingers tightened on Jake's hand. I find myself wishing he possessed even a fraction of your warmth. Lyra, Jake said, turning his hand palm up to properly hold hers. What are we doing here? I don't know, she admitted. I only know that when I'm with you, I forget about imperial duty and political necessity. When you call me sweetheart, I feel like someone I have never been allowed to be. When you smile, my heart does something that 10,000 years of Zephyrian evolution never prepared me for. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped across the table, both aware they were crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. There's something I need to tell you too, Jake said finally. Ambassador Chen thinks you're manipulating me, using my feelings to get better treaty terms for your empire. Princess Lyrelai's expression shifted, hurt flickering across her features. Do you believe that? No, Jake said without hesitation. What I feel when I'm with you. You can't fake that. And what I see in your eyes when you look at me, that's real too. Then what do? I am a princess of an ancient empire, bound by duty and tradition. You are a human, member of a species my people consider barely civilized. There is no precedent for this, no path forward that doesn't lead to disaster. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Maybe that's exactly why we need to try. If humans and Zephyrians are ever going to really have peace, maybe it starts with two people from different worlds proving that understanding is possible. Or maybe, she said with a sad smile, it ends with both of us losing everything we've ever known for something that cannot last. Maybe, Jake agreed. But maybe some things are worth the risk. Princess Lyrelai stood and walked around the table to where he sat. Looking down at him, she seemed to glow with her own inner light. If I asked you to do something that could destroy both our careers and possibly start a new war, would you trust me enough to say yes? Jake stood to face her, close enough now that he could smell the strange, sweet scent of her hair. Lyra, at this point, I'd follow you into a black hole if you asked nicely. Her smile was radiant. Then tomorrow, during the final treaty ceremony, I want you to stand beside me as more than just military escort. I want you to stand beside me as my chosen companion. Your what? It is an old Zephyrian custom. When a princess takes a mate, he stands at her right hand during formal ceremonies as a symbol of union. If I do this, it will be a public declaration that supersedes any previous betrothal arrangements. Jake stared at her, hardly breathing. Lyra, that's basically a proposal. Yes, she said simply. It is. Jake spent the entire night pacing his quarters, Princess Lyrelai's proposal echoing in his mind. Standing beside her as chosen companion would be more than a personal declaration. It would be a political earthquake that could reshape the relationship between their species forever. Ambassador. Chen knocked on his door before dawn, looking haggard and worried. Captain, I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications channels. There's unusual activity from their Imperial Council. Something has them agitated. Chen studied Jake's face. Please tell me you didn't agree to anything reckless last night. Jake couldn't meet his eyes. Sir, what if I told you there was a chance to cement this peace treaty in a way that goes beyond political agreements? Something that would make war between our species not just unlikely, but personally painful to both sides. I'd say you're talking about something that sounds suspiciously like interspecies romance, which could either be the greatest diplomatic breakthrough in human history or the spark that ignites a war of extermination. Chen sat heavily in the room's single chair. Jake, what did she ask you to do? Before Jake could answer, their communications panel chimed with an urgent message. Princess Lyrelai's face appeared on the screen, but she looked different, more formal, more distant. Behind her, Jake could see other Zephyrians in elaborate robes that marked them as high-ranking officials. Captain Morrison, Ambassador Chen, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Please report to the main ceremonial hall in 1 hour for the treaty signing ceremony. Full dress uniforms are requested. The screen went dark, leaving them in silence. Something's wrong, Jake said immediately. She didn't call me Jake, and she looked like someone was watching her. Chen nodded grimly. The Imperial Council must have arrived overnight. This just became much more complicated. In the ceremonial hall, Jake understood immediately how much had changed. The space was filled with Zephyrians he hadn't seen before. Older, more imposing figures whose robes marked them as nobility. At their center stood a male Zephyrian who radiated authority and barely concealed hostility. His presence made the air feel cold. Princess Lyrelai stood at the ceremonial podium, looking every inch the imperial air in flowing robes that seemed to be woven from captured starlight. But when her eyes found Jake's across the room, he saw a flash of something desperate beneath her composed exterior. Honored representatives of humanity, she began formally. Today we conclude negotiations that will bring peace between our peoples. Let this treaty stand as proof that even species separated by evolution and distance can find common ground. Ambassador Chen stepped forward to sign the human copy of the document, and Jake took his position as military escort, standing behind and to the left as protocol demanded. But as Chen's stylus touched the crystalline surface that would record humanity's agreement, Princess Lyreley spoke again. However, there is one additional declaration I must make before this ceremony concludes. Her voice carried clearly through the hall, and Jake saw several Zephyrian officials straighten in alarm. According to the ancient laws of our empire, I claim the right of Zephyrantal, the choosing of one's own mate through public declaration. The reaction was immediate. The male Zephyrian who Jake now realized must be Prince Vextar stepped forward angrily. Lyreley, this is not the time for such announcements. Your betrothal has already been arranged and approved by the Imperial Council. And according to the ancient laws that predate the Imperial Council by millennia, Princess Lyreley replied with steel in her voice, no Zephyrian of royal blood can be compelled to mate against their will if they publicly declare their choice before witnesses. Prince Vextar's eyes narrowed. And who, cousin, do you presume to choose over an alliance that benefits the entire empire? Princess Lyreley's gaze found Jake's across the room. Time seemed to slow as she extended her hand toward him. Captain Jake Morrison of Earth, will you stand beside me as my chosen companion? The ceremonial hall erupted. Prince Vextar snarled something in rapid Zephyrian that needed no translation. Other nobles burst into agitated conversation. Ambassador Chen grabbed Jake's arm hard enough to bruise, but Jake only had eyes for Princess Lyreley. For Lyra, standing alone at the podium with her hand extended, staking her entire future on his answer. In her starlight eyes he saw courage that humbled him and love that made his heart race. Yes, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then louder. Yes. He walked across the hall toward her, past shocked nobles and horrified human diplomats, past centuries of tradition and the weight of two empires watching. When he reached the podium, Princess Lyreley took his hand and pulled him to stand at her right side. By the ancient law of Zephyrantal, she declared, her voice ringing with authority, I choose Jake Morrison as my mate and companion. Let this choice be recorded in the Imperial Archives. Prince Vextar stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. This is an insult to everything our empire represents. He is not even Zephyrian. He is a primitive alien, barely worthy of being a pet, let alone mating with royalty. Careful, Jake said quietly, but his voice carried in the shocked silence. You're talking about the woman I love. Love? Prince Vextar laughed harshly. You know nothing of Zephyrian mating customs. This union will produce no offspring. Our species are incompatible. It serves no political purpose. It strengthens no alliances. It is emotion without logic, desire without benefit. You're right, Jake said, stepping forward slightly. I don't know your customs. I don't understand your politics. I can't give her children or strengthen your empire's position in the galaxy. He looked back at Princess Lyreley, then faced the assembly again. But I can love her for who she is, not what she represents. I can make her laugh and keep her company and listen when she needs someone to understand her. Sometimes that's worth more than all the political advantages in the universe. An elderly Zephyrian noble stepped forward, someone whose robes marked him as even higher ranking than Prince Vextar. Princess Lyreley, he said in a voice like distant thunder, this human speaks of love as if it trumps duty. Do you truly believe emotion should guide the decisions of those who rule? Princess Lyreley lifted her chin defiantly. Honored counselor, our empire spans 1,000 worlds, because our ancestors were brave enough to reach beyond what was known and safe. They explored impossible distances, made alliances with species they had never encountered, took risks that seemed insane to their contemporaries. She squeezed Jake's hand. Sometimes the greatest act of service to one's people is proving that growth and understanding are still possible. Pretty words, Prince Vextar sneered. But what happens when this novelty wears off? When you tire of your pet human and remember your true responsibilities? Jake felt anger flash through him. But before he could respond, Princess Lyreley's voice cut through the air like a blade. Vextar, you will show respect for my chosen companion, or you will leave this ceremony immediately. Her tone carried absolute authority, and Jake was reminded that beneath the woman who called him darling, there was a princess who commanded fleets. Jake Morrison has shown more honor and courage in 4 days than you have displayed in 4 decades of military service." The silence that followed was broken by Ambassador Chen's shaky voice. "Your Highness, while we appreciate your feelings toward Captain Morrison, perhaps this decision should be discussed privately before any irreversible declarations are made." Princess Lyrelei turned to address the human delegation. "Ambassador Chen, you have negotiated in good faith for peace between our peoples. But true peace cannot be built on political agreements alone. It requires understanding, trust, and the belief that we have more in common than our differences might suggest." She looked at Jake again, and her formal composure softened slightly. "This human has shown me that such understanding is possible. Through him, I have learned that your species possesses depths my people never imagined." "And what have you learned through her?" asked the elderly counselor, his ancient eyes fixed on Jake. Jake took a breath, knowing his next words would either doom them both or change everything. "I've learned that wisdom and kindness aren't limited by species, that love can bridge any gap if both people are brave enough to try. And I've learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the courage to choose hope over fear." The counselor studied them both for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "The ancient law of Zephyrantal is clear. Princess Lyrelei has made her choice in accordance with our oldest traditions. However," he paused ominously, "such a union must be tested to ensure it serves the greater good of the Empire." The counselor's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake felt Princess Lyrelei's hand tighten in his as the elderly Zephyrian continued speaking. "For 10,000 years, the Zephyrantal has been used only within our own species. There is no precedent for testing the bond between Zephyrian and alien." The counselor's ancient eyes seemed to peer directly into Jake's soul. "However, our laws speak not of species but of souls. If this human truly possesses what your people call consciousness and what we recognize as sentient essence, then the testing may proceed." Prince Vextar stepped forward aggressively. "Counselor Zarthax, surely you cannot be serious about subjecting a member of the royal bloodline to archaic rituals for the sake of an alien infatuation." "The law is the law, Prince Vextar," Counselor Zarthax replied coldly. "Princess Lyrelei has invoked one of our most sacred traditions. To ignore it would undermine the very foundations of our imperial authority." He turned back to face the couple. "Captain Morrison, do you understand what a soul bond test entails?" Jake glanced at Princess Lyrelei, who had gone very pale. "No, sir, but if it means proving my commitment to Lyra, I'm willing to try." "It is not a test of commitment," Princess Lyrelei said quietly, her voice strained. "Jake, the soul bond test requires both participants to share their deepest memories, their greatest fears, their most private thoughts. Through psychic linkage, we become completely open to each other. Many Zephyrian couples fail this test because they discover they cannot bear such total intimacy. And if we fail?" Counselor Zarthax answered before she could. "If the bond cannot be established, or if it is established but rejected by either party, then Princess Lyrelei's claim of Zephyrantal is voided. She would be required to honor her previous betrothal arrangement. And if we succeed, then your union would be recognized under imperial law, superseding all previous arrangements." The counselor's expression was unreadable. "However, Captain Morrison, you should understand that this test has never been attempted between species. The psychic differences between Zephyrian and human minds could make the process dangerous. In the worst case, the mental strain could leave you permanently damaged or even result in death." Ambassador Chen stepped forward quickly. "Your Honors, surely there must be some alternative. Captain Morrison is a valuable member of our diplomatic mission." "Ambassador," Jake interrupted firmly, "this is my choice to make." He looked into Princess Lyrelei's starlight eyes and saw fear there, not for herself but for him. "Lyra, what are the chances of success?" "I don't know," she admitted. "No one does. But Jake, I cannot ask you to risk your life for—" "You're not asking," Jake said softly. "I'm volunteering." He turned to address the assembly. "When do we take this test?" Counselor Zarthax studied him for a long moment. "Your courage is admirable, human. Very well. The testing chamber will be prepared. However, tradition demands a waiting period of 24 hours, during which either party may withdraw their consent without penalty." As the formal ceremony dissolved into clusters of nervous conversation, Jake and Princess Lyrelei found themselves escorted to separate quarters. The waiting period, they were told, must be spent apart to ensure that their decision was not influenced by proximity or emotion. Jake's new room was luxurious by human standards but felt like a prison. He spent hours staring out at the alien stars, wondering if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Ambassador Chen visited twice, each time trying to convince him to reconsider. "Jake, I've been researching Zephyrian psychic bonding," Chen said during his second visit. "Their minds process information completely differently from ours. The neural patterns alone could overload your brain. You could end up in a coma or worse. But I could also end up bonded to the most amazing woman I've ever met," Jake replied. "Chen, you've seen us together. You know this isn't just infatuation. I know you care about her, but caring isn't worth dying for." Jake turned from the window to face the ambassador. "With respect, sir, that's where you're wrong. Some things are worth any risk." Sarah knew that when she defended Mars Station. Tom knew it when he held the line at Kepler. "And I know it now." Chen left, shaking his head, and Jake was alone with his thoughts again. As the hours passed, he found himself thinking not just about Princess Lirelai, but about what their relationship could mean for both species. If they could make this work, if they could prove that human and Zephyrian could truly understand each other, it might open doors that had never existed before. Meanwhile, in her own quarters, Princess Lirelai was having her own struggles. Prince Vextar had demanded a private audience during which he made his position brutally clear. "This madness ends now, Lirelai. That human has obviously used some form of primitive psychological manipulation on you. Withdraw your claim of Zephyrantol and marry me as planned. I promise to overlook this embarrassing episode." "Vextar," she replied icily, "if you believe Jake has manipulated me, then you understand nothing about either humans or myself. I chose him because he treats me as Lyra, not as Princess Lirelai. Can you say the same? I treat you as befits your station." "Exactly." She stood from her meditation alcove, her robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. "You see a title, a political advantage, a stepping stone to greater power. Jake sees me." Prince Vextar's expression darkened. "And when his primitive mind burns out during the soul bond test? When you're left with a mindless shell or a corpse? Will your precious emotional connection comfort you then?" Despite her outward composure, Princess Lirelai felt fear gnaw at her heart. She had researched the risks as thoroughly as Ambassador Chen had, and she knew the odds were not encouraging. Human brains simply weren't designed for Zephyrian-level psychic contact. But when she thought of Jake's smile, of the way he hummed old songs without realizing it, of how he had looked when he called her sweetheart, she knew she had to try. The night passed slowly for both of them. As dawn approached, or what passed for dawn on a ship traveling between stars, Jake made his final preparations. He recorded a message for his parents back on Earth, wrote a letter to be delivered to Sarah's grave marker on Mars, and reviewed the service record of his brother Tom one last time. When the call came to proceed to the testing chamber, Jake felt surprisingly calm. He had made peace with his decision, whatever the consequences might be. The testing chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. A spherical room lined with what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. In the center was a raised platform with two connected alcoves designed to hold the participants during the bonding process. Princess Lirelai was already there, wearing simple white robes that made her look younger and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. When their eyes met across the chamber, she smiled, the same warm expression that had captivated him from their first meeting. "Any last doubts?" she asked as they approached the platform together. "Only about whether I'm good enough for you," Jake replied honestly. "And I have the same doubt in reverse," she said, taking his hand. "Shall we find out together?" Counselor Zarthax approached with several technicians carrying equipment that seemed to be part machinery, part living organism. "Princess Lirelai, Captain Morrison, are you both certain you wish to proceed with the soul bond test?" "Yes," they answered in unison. "Then let the testing begin. May your souls find harmony, or may your separation be swift and merciful." As Jake settled into his alcove, he felt crystalline tendrils begin to attach themselves to his temples. The last thing he saw before the psychic link activated was Princess Lirelai's face, filled with love and hope and terror. Then the universe exploded into light and sensation as two alien minds prepared to merge. The moment the psychic link activated, Jake felt like he was drowning in an ocean of starlight. Princess Lyrelai's mind was vast, ancient memories stretching back through centuries of Zephyrian culture, knowledge that spanned galaxies, awareness of cosmic forces that human science had barely begun to understand. But beneath all that impossible depth, he found something wonderfully familiar: loneliness, the same aching isolation he had carried since Sarah's death, the same yearning for connection that had driven him to reach beyond species boundaries for love. Through their shared mental space, he felt Princess Lyrelai's surprise as she encountered his memories. She experienced his childhood on Mars colony through his eyes, the red dust storms that turned the sky bronze, the sound of his father's workshop where broken things were made whole again, the simple joy of a family dinner under the artificial dome lights. The pain hit next. Jake felt Princess Lyrelai recoil as she experienced Sarah's death through his memories. The desperate space battle around Mars, the moment her ship exploded in a flash of nuclear fire, the months of grief that followed. But instead of pulling away, she wrapped his emotional agony in something warm and healing, sharing her own losses in return. He saw her brother Kethvar, the fleet commander who had died at Alpha Centauri, not as the enemy target Jake had known him to be, but as a loving older brother who used to sing lullabies that made flowers bloom in the royal gardens. He experienced her grief when the news came, felt how she had locked herself in the crystal caves beneath the palace for weeks, refusing all comfort. The bonding process deepened, and Jake began to understand why so many couples failed this test. Every secret, every shameful moment, every private fear was laid bare between them. He felt Princess Lyrelai discover his insecurities, his worry that he was just a simple soldier out of his depth, his fear that she was too good for him, his terror that this was all some elaborate alien manipulation he was too stupid to recognize. In return, he learned that she had similar doubts. Despite her royal status and vast knowledge, she feared she was boring compared to human passion and creativity. She worried that her attraction to him was just rebellion against her arranged marriage. She was terrified that his feelings were based on her exotic nature rather than genuine affection. But as their minds intertwined more completely, those fears began to dissolve. Jake felt the precise moment Princess Lyrelai had fallen for him, not when he called her sweetheart, but earlier when he had spoken honestly about loss and love during their first private conversation. She had been surprised by his emotional depth, touched by his vulnerability, drawn to his fundamental kindness. Princess Lyrelai, meanwhile, experienced Jake's growing love through his own perceptions. She felt how her laugh had made his heart race, how her genuine interest in human culture had moved him, how her willingness to choose personal happiness over political duty had amazed him. Through his eyes, she saw herself not as an alien princess, but as a woman worth loving. The soul bond test progressed through stages, each more intimate than the last. They shared their happiest memories: Jake's first successful flight as a pilot, Princess Lyrelai's discovery of a new mathematical theorem that had advanced Zephyrian science. They relived their worst moments, his mistakes that had cost lives in battle, her political decisions that had led to unnecessary conflicts. Through it all, Jake marveled at how similar they were beneath the surface differences. Both carried the weight of responsibility for others' lives. Both struggled with the gap between who they were expected to be and who they really were. Both had learned to find joy in small moments while dealing with large sorrows. The mental strain was enormous. Jake could feel his human brain being pushed to its limits by contact with Princess Lyrelai's vastly more complex mind. Several times he nearly lost consciousness as alien thought patterns threatened to overwhelm his neural pathways. But each time he faltered, he felt her presence supporting him, adjusting her mental voice to frequencies he could handle, protecting him from the full force of her psychic capabilities. In the testing chamber, the monitors showed both participants under tremendous stress. Counselor Zarthax watched the readouts with growing concern as Jake's human biosigns spiked, repeatedly into dangerous ranges. "Perhaps we should terminate the procedure," suggested one of the technicians. "The human's neural activity is approaching critical levels." "No." Princess Lyrelai's voice came through the communication system, though her body remained motionless in the bonding alcove. "He's stronger than you think. We're almost through the deepest phase." Inside their shared mental space, Jake and Princess Lyrelai approached the final stage of the soul bond test. Here they had to choose whether to accept each other completely. Not just the attractive parts, But the flaws, the baggage, the fundamental differences that could never be changed. Jake saw Princess Lyra Lee's capacity for cold calculation when Empire security was at stake. He experienced memories where she had ordered actions that resulted in deaths, made decisions based on logic rather than mercy, prioritized Zephyrian interests over individual suffering. This was not just the woman who called him darling. This was an alien ruler whose moral framework was shaped by cosmic scales he could barely comprehend. Princess Lyra Lee, meanwhile, encountered Jake's human limitations head-on. His lifespan was a mere century compared to her millennia. His knowledge was restricted to one small world's perspective. His emotional responses sometimes overwhelmed his rational thinking. He would never understand the full complexity of the universe she navigated daily. For a moment that lasted eternities, they both hesitated. The differences were real, the challenges enormous. It would be so much easier to pull back, to choose the safe path that their respective species expected. Then Jake felt Princess Lyra Lee's presence wrap around his consciousness like a warm embrace, and he knew his answer. Yes, she was alien. Yes, they came from different worlds in every sense. But beneath all of that, she was Lyra, the woman who listened to his stories, who shared her fears, who had been brave enough to risk everything for love. At the same moment, Princess Lyra Lee made her own choice. Jake was human, limited, temporary by her people's standards, but he was also kind, brave, and genuine in ways that her ancient, sophisticated species had somehow forgotten. He made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined possible. Their acceptance resonated through the psychic link, creating a feedback loop of affection and understanding that stabilized both their mental patterns. Jake felt his consciousness expand, not to match Princess Lyra Lee's cosmic awareness, but to create a unique shared space where human warmth and Zephyrian wisdom could coexist. In the testing chamber, the monitors showed a remarkable stabilization. Both participants' biosigns synchronized into a pattern the technicians had never seen before. Not purely Zephyrian, not purely human, but something new. Extraordinary, whispered Counselor Zarthax. They're creating a hybrid neural pattern. The bond is not just successful, it's evolutionarily unprecedented. The psychic link began to fade as the formal testing period ended, but Jake could feel something permanent had changed. Princess Lyra Lee wasn't just in his thoughts anymore. She was part of his thoughts, a warm presence that would remain with him always. When he opened his eyes and saw her sitting up in her own alcove, her smile confirmed that she felt the same connection. "Well," she said, her voice shaky with exhaustion and joy, "I believe we have our answer." Jake managed to sit up, his head spinning from the ordeal. "How do you feel?" "Like I've just discovered that my soul is bigger than I thought," she replied. "And you?" "Like I just came home after being lost for years." Counselor Zarthax approached the platform, his ancient face showing something that might have been amazement. "Princess Lyra Lee, Captain Morrison, I have witnessed soul bond tests for 8 centuries. What I have observed today is unique. Not only have you successfully bonded, but you have created something entirely new. A mental connection that bridges species barriers we thought were absolute." Prince Vextar, who had watched the proceedings with growing dismay, stepped forward angrily. "Counselor, surely this proves nothing except that both participants are mentally unstable. The readings are completely outside normal parameters." "Prince Vextar," Counselor Zarthax replied calmly, "the readings are outside normal parameters because this situation is outside all precedent. But the bond is real, stable, and freely chosen by both parties. Under the law of Zephyrental, Princess Lyra Lee's choice stands." Jake and Princess Lyra Lee helped each other down from the platform, still shaky from the ordeal, but glowing with happiness. When their hands touched, Jake felt the psychic bond resonate softly. Not the overwhelming connection of the test, but a gentle awareness that would let them find each other across any distance. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Princess Lyra Lee looked at the assembly of nobles, diplomats, and officials, then back at Jake with a smile that could have powered a star. "Now, my darling human, we change the universe." 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned peace station orbiting Earth, watching Zephyrian and human ships dock side by side. What had begun as a simple diplomatic mission had transformed into something no one could have predicted. The first interspecies alliance based not on conquest or necessity, but on genuine understanding. You're thinking very loudly, sweetheart, Princess Lyra Lee said as she joined him at the viewport. The psychic bond they shared had settled into a comfortable background, awareness that let them sense each other's moods and general thoughts without the overwhelming intimacy of the soul bond test. Just amazed at how much has changed, Jake replied, wrapping his arm around her waist. She had traded her formal imperial robes for a more practical outfit that blended human and Zephyrian styles, though she still managed to look impossibly elegant. 6 months ago, our species were shooting at each other. Now we're planning joint exploration missions to the Galactic Rim. Princess Lyra Lee leaned into his embrace, watching a human cargo vessel carefully dock with a Zephyrian science ship. The Imperial Council finally decided that if a human could successfully bond with Zephyrian royalty, perhaps your species deserves more credit than they initially thought. Your people's adaptability and emotional resilience have impressed even our most conservative nobles. Even Prince Vextar? Vextar is leading a fleet to the Andromeda Galaxy, where he can practice traditional imperial expansion without interfering with our new policies, she said with amusement. He petitioned the council to let him restore proper order to the universe as far away from Earth as possible. Jake chuckled. And you're okay with being the first Zephyrian princess to marry an alien? I'm okay with being the first Zephyrian princess to marry for love, she corrected. The fact that you happen to be alien is just a bonus that's opened up fascinating new possibilities for our empire. It was true. Their successful bonding had sparked a revolution in Zephyrian society. For the first time in millennia, young Zephyrians were questioning arranged marriages and demanding the right to choose their own mates. Meanwhile, on Earth, Jake and Princess Lyra Lee had become symbols of humanity's potential to reach beyond its origins. Ambassador Chen wants to discuss the Mars Colony Exchange Program, Princess Lyra Lee said, settling more comfortably against Jake's side. Apparently 300 Zephyrian scientists have applied to study human engineering techniques, and twice that many humans want to attend the Academy of Cosmic Sciences on Xerion Prime. What do you think? I think your species' gift for improvisation and creative problem-solving would benefit from our advanced theoretical knowledge. While our people could learn much from human persistence and adaptability, she paused thoughtfully. I also think some of those applicants might be hoping to find what we found, proof that love can transcend any boundary. Jake turned to face her fully, marveling as he always did at how her eyes seemed to hold captured starlight. Any regrets? About giving up your arranged marriage, defying imperial tradition, linking your fate to a primitive human who still can't figure out your food synthesizers? Princess Lyra Lee's smile was radiant. Jake Morrison, I traded a political alliance that would have strengthened our hold on 12-star systems for a love that's opened the door to understanding between species. I exchanged a predictable life of imperial duty for adventures I never could have imagined. She reached up to touch his face gently. The only thing I regret is that we didn't meet sooner. We might have been shooting at each other sooner, Jake pointed out. True. Perhaps the universe has its own timing for these things. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the impossible sight of former enemies working together to build something better. Through the viewport, Jake could see human children playing with young Zephyrians in the station's central park, their laughter carrying through the observation. Deck's audio pickups. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Jake said suddenly. Princess Lyra Lee looked at him with curiosity. What's that, my darling human? Well, we've been soul bonded for 6 months and officially married by both Earth and Zephyrian law for 3 months. We've got a peace treaty that's working better than anyone expected, and 2 species learning to understand each other. So? He grinned. What do we do for an encore? Princess Lyra Lee's laugh was like silver music. I have a few ideas. The Imperial Council has asked me to establish a new department focused on interspecies relations. They want to explore peaceful contact with other species throughout the galaxy, using our relationship as a model for how different civilizations can find common ground. That sounds like it. Could keep us busy for a few decades, at least. And there's something else. Her expression became more serious. Jake, our soul bond was unprecedented, but it's also proven stable and beneficial to both of us. The Psychic Research Division wants to study whether other human Zephyrian couples could achieve similar connections. Jake raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting we become matchmakers for 2 species? I'm suggesting we help other people find what we found if they're brave enough to try. She gestured toward the viewport, where human and Zephyrian crew members were working together with obvious mutual respect and growing friendship. Look how much has changed just from proving that understanding is possible. Imagine what could happen if more people made the choice to love instead of fear. Jake pulled her closer, feeling the soft resonance of their psychic bond confirm what his heart already knew. Sweetheart, if there's one thing I've learned from falling in love with an alien princess, it's that the best adventures start with taking impossible risks. Is that a yes? That's a let's change the universe together, Jake replied, kissing her forehead. Besides, someone has to teach all these new couples that the secret to interspecies romance is finding someone who makes you laugh when they try to pronounce your name. Wrong, Princess Lyrelei giggled, a sound that still amazed Jake for its pure humanity despite coming from someone who could calculate hyperspace coordinates in her head. My darling human, you do realize that our children are going to be the most unique beings in the galaxy? Part human creativity and persistence, part Zephyrian knowledge and longevity. Are you? Jake's eyes widened. Not yet, she said quickly. But the medical research teams believe it might be possible. The soul bond has created neural pathways that could theoretically allow for genetic compatibility between our species. Jake stared at her, hardly daring to hope. Lyra, are you saying we could actually have a family? I'm saying the universe keeps surprising us, and perhaps the biggest surprises are yet to come. As if summoned by their conversation, Ambassador Chen approached with a tablet full of reports and an expression of bemused exhaustion. Princess Lyrelei, Captain Morrison, I have updates on the cultural exchange programs. 3 marriage proposals from human Zephyrian couples wanting soul bond ceremonies, and a request from the Galactic Geographic Society to interview you about love among the stars. Jake and Princess Lyrelei exchanged glances, their psychic bond carrying shared amusement and affection. Tell the Geographic Society yes, Princess Lyrelei said. Tell the couples we'd be honored to help them and schedule the cultural exchanges for next month. An ambassador, Jake added, put in a request for a bigger station. Something tells me we're going to need more room. As Chen walked away, muttering about the complications of interspecies diplomacy, Jake and Princess Lyrelei returned to watching the stars. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but they would face it together, one human, one alien, and a love story that had already begun to change everything. Jake, Princess Lyrelei said softly, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't called me sweetheart that first day? Every day, he admitted. But then I remember that some things are meant to be. Maybe I would have found another way to tell you that you were more than just a princess to me. And maybe I would have found another way to let you know that you were more than just a primitive alien to me, she replied with a smile. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. There's something beautifully simple about a love story that started with an accidental endearment. Simple? Jake laughed. Sweetheart, there was nothing simple about falling in love with you. No, Princess Lyrelei agreed, her eyes sparkling with mischief and affection, but it was definitely worth it, my darling human. Outside their viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, but the future they illuminated was brighter than anyone had dared to dream. Love had built a bridge between worlds, and somewhere in the vast galaxy, other hearts were learning that the greatest adventures begin with the courage to reach across impossible distances and whisper, "Hello, sweetheart," to someone who might just whisper back, "Hello, my darling," in return.